Welcome to Plot Recon, where thrillers get tactical. I'm your host, Evan Graber. Today, we're headed into the world of high velocity action fiction with author Brian Drake. Brian lives and writes in California, where he's built a career crafting fast moving thrillers filled with spies, covert operators, and hard charging heroes. With multiple series under his belt, including Scott Stiletto, Sam Raven, and Steve Dorn, he's carved out a space for pure action adrenaline storytelling that feels right at home for fans of classic action and modern thrillers alike. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Well, thank you, Evan. It's fun to be here.
Oh, good. Glad we could get our technical issues straightened out.
Oh,
So,
most definitely. I'm still making adjustments on my mixing console here, but anyway, I think we're okay.
we shall carry on. So, my one of my first questions is always, how did you get started in writing and publishing?
You realize now I got to remember, 30, 40 years ago now. it's they keep the backstory keeps getting further and further away from me. Uh, I was always doing some sort of writing, whether it was comic books, drawing my own comics and writing, drawing and filling in the bubbles, or short stories or whatever it was. After I started reading, real books instead of just comics, I was always scribbling something, and then I found out that how did I find out? I read somewhere that Stephen King made a significant amount of money on a particular book, and I'm like, oh, you can get paid for this. And it's like, okay, well, this might be an interesting job to have. So it kind of just became the obsession, and I haven't signed any big deals like Mr. King has, but we've done okay, and it's a side hustle. It's not a full time job, at least not yet. I don't know if it's going to be. It's been suggested to me that I keep it part time. Um, we'll see. It's kind of like every year. It's like, okay, can we go full time now? And it's like, not really. And and it's nice to have a side job to fill up the savings account. But yeah, I've been scribbling most of my life, and a lot of other hobbies and interests and jobs, etc., have come and go. But it's like writing stories, and it's just been this one thing that's been with me my entire life. And it's the only thing really. I mean, other than parents and stuff like that. The basics. But the one interest I've had that I've stayed with, out of all the others that I've not stayed with, has been writing.
Very good. So, you told me earlier in our conversation that you worked at a radio station. So,
Yeah, still do
okay.
radio
So
and television.
talk to us about that. What are you doing at the radio station?
Well, right now I do traffic and weather reports, and I used to do news. Before that, I played music. I got sick of playing Britney freaking Spears every 15 minutes, and then trying to sound excited about it. And you get older, and that music that had never had any appeal to you to begin with starts to have less appeal even later. So I got into news and talk, and that turned into traffic and weather, and that's kind of where I've been the last, I don't know, 10 years. Because locally we don't do our news reports anymore, and so yeah, I just do traffic and weather, and we have a good time.
Well, great. That's
Yeah, I get because it's
it keeps you busy other than writing. So,
well, yeah. I'm in the Bay Area, about near San Francisco, and there's just a lot of stuff to talk about around here when it comes to traffic and weather. So I mean, it's still news in a way. It's not the kind of news I would like to be doing, but I would have to make significant changes in order to do that again, and I'm not willing to make those changes.
that's understandable. And
Hmm.
I think we get set in our ways and in our place, and those changes are difficult to make when we
Yeah.
yeah. So so when you started writing, were you interested just doing standalones, or did you think go into it writing a series?
Ooh, that's a good question. I was always thinking about series because that's what I was reading. If it wasn't Mac Bolan, it was James Bond. It was always a set of books that had a continuing character. The only standalones I read came from like Robert Ludlum and a little Forsyth here and there. In fact, I mean, you mentioned Scott Stiletto as part of my credits. That is a name I came up with sitting in the back of my eighth grade math class when I was 14, and that's the character I kind of worked with growing up, and so yeah. I mean, I guess it always has been. I always was thinking series, and anything I did come up with is like, okay, is there at least one or two sequels? Now that I'm older and writing strictly series still, I'm now interested in standalones, and I would really like to write something that doesn't have a follow up to it. Just one complete story and it's done. And but I keep hearing that the market isn't into those anymore.
Yeah, the what where we write the thriller genre is, and especially if you're writing to a market like on Amazon, it's a series.
Yeah,
And I know you're on KU, so that read through is the most important thing to an author in that, you know, on that platform.
yeah. There are, I mean, definite market considerations for a series, and fans like them. I'm not against them. The problem you can have with the series though is that authors get so, and this applies to me too. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but you get so stuck in your ways with one character. You're not learning stuff. You're not learning how to set scenes better or challenge yourself in such a way as to tell your story in a different way, because you're just running this guy around the same as he ever was. And it is one thing I've tried to do, where each book sets up some sort of challenge to overcome, that while it remains a series and follows the formula, that I can still find something to learn, whether it's setting a scene or a way of dialogue or perspective, or whatever the inside baseball thing is that's just going to bore people to death if I keep going. But it was something Ed Gorman, the late Ed Gorman, unfortunately said one time, is that if all you do is write series, you run the risk of not learning. And so I've tried to learn stuff with each book.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable lesson for any writer is to always be learning something new and improving your craft.
Well, one thing I like to do about every 10 books is reinvent myself a little bit, where it's like you forget everything you know, or try to, and then go back to the sources that I learned from and just kind of refresh on all the old information. I really like the masterclass lectures. This is a plug. I'm not getting anything for it, but they're valuable, so I'm going to talk about it. The masterclass lectures, especially with Dan Brown and, oh, who's the other fellow I don't like? Never mind. I can't remember his name. So, but they have a great deal of authors on there, and or David Mamet, who does plays, talking about craft and how to build a story. And I like to go back to those every now and then to just refresh my memory and learn how to do it right, because you do forget stuff. You do get lazy, and so I'm. It's been 12 books now. We're up to Raven 12. So I do want to go back and go through those again and just start from scratch again with the next set of books, and even if it's in the same series, and they'll be that much better for it.
So when you finish the book and you ship it off to your editor, are you counting on your editor to give you feedback in that general direction too?
Um, well, the publisher I'm with now, Wolfpack, they're a little light-handed on editing, which has its pluses and minuses. Where, on one hand, it is on the author to get everything right and to develop the story in such a way that there aren't incredible problems. So I've learned how to do a developmental edit, and I start with an outline and make sure you got to make sure it makes sense, and that characters behave in ways that are appropriate to them, and you don't write an idiot plot. One of those, you don't have moments where someone's going down the stairs into the basement where you know the killer's hiding, and the horror movie, don't go down the stairs. Well, they do it anyway, and then they get slashed. That's an idiot plot. You don't want to do those. Uh, so with this light-handed editing, it is really up to us to make sure the books are right. That being said, when they come back, the editors, every little comma is, I mean, they do get detailed with each line, and then you've got to go through it, and after you've been through it 3 or 4 times already, and I have other people go through it, we all miss stuff, and then it comes back from the publisher, and what are all these errors in it? I thought, what am I paying you people for if I'm still getting errors? So we have that little comedy skit to do. But they're as detailed as they can be, in the time that we all have, and I think they do a pretty good job. And then, of course, it goes up on Amazon, and you get 3 or 4 reviews with each book saying that this book needs an editor. It's like, I don't know how hard or how many more times we can go through it and find everything. It's like we work very hard, and stuff still gets through, and it drives you nuts.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. We want to go through this book and make it perfect and put it out there, and then somebody will send me a note that says, "Hey, this word is misspelled, or you use this word inappropriately, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever." But every traditional book I've ever read has at least one misspelled word.
Yeah, I don't mind one. When
Yeah.
there's more than one, I start getting a little upset, and it's like, okay, what can I do better? I can't put all of the work on the publisher, because the editor who goes through my book is on a time crunch. She's got a stack of manuscripts to go through herself. Um, so it's like, okay, what can I do on my end to make it better? And it's just the continuous questions you ask yourself on ways to improve, and each one we try new tricks, and eventually we'll figure something out, and by then it'll be the last book, and they'll be shipping us away. So it's
Yep. But by the time you've perfected it, you're done with the craft. So,
yeah, right.
uh, so you have Scott Stiletto, Sam Raven, and Steve Dane. You ever
Yes,
get confused?
yes, yeah. Try no, a true story, because I have there's other stuff I write that my publisher doesn't see because it's not stuff that they're interested in. But I do it on the side just to challenge myself. So I was working on one of those side projects along with a Sam Raven, and not that they were similar stories, but similar content. They're both action adventure, different plots, different characters, different everything. But every time I would start to work on one or the other, I would have to get into the headspace of which one I was in. It's like I have to read the last couple of pages. Um, One of the books took place in Los Angeles. The Sam Raven had something to do with an incident in Virginia. But while I was writing the Sam Raven, this one I just turned in actually, I talked about the arrival of police on some sort of on the scene of an incident, and I referred to the L.A. police. Where Sam Raven looks at all the cars coming in, and it's like, oh, it looks like the entire Los Angeles Police Department is here. There's a note from the editor in the manuscript. Aren't they in Virginia? And it's like, yeah, because I got it confused with the other ones. So yes, you do get confused. You have to tread carefully, and hope somebody catches the mistakes.
That is true. I was asked once, how do you, because I have 3 different characters in my series, and they asked me, how do you keep it all straight? And I said, well, each character is basically the same. I just turn up different attributes. Where one guy might be kind of waffling over shooting somebody, the other guy has no qualms about it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so
Well, there's some truth to that too on my end, where the you mentioned all the other guys, but you left out Wolf.
okay,
That was a set of short stories. So from Wolf to Stiletto to Steve Dane, if you if you look at Sam Raven carefully enough, you can see that he contains traits of all three, and it wasn't intentional. It was just that's what's in the brain and in the in the blender when it's coming time to to come up with the next dish. And when I poured it all out, then Sam Raven had traits from all three of those other guys. So, and then
Yeah.
plus his own and a different backstory. But right, when you are writing a series and staying in a particular subject matter, you are going to repeat yourself. It's just the little differences that make things stand out.
I think that when we pick out our characters and we give our characters attributes, they're inevitably attributes that we have because it's difficult to write outside of our own personality and our own. Um, I, I had a word, but I forgot it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to write a villain that when you don't have that internal instinct to kill somebody in you.
True, and I think you're right about the other parts. Either they have either the characters have our traits or they have traits we wish we had. And as far as villains go, I mean, if you look at history and look at statements from people that have been arrested for various crimes, they always think they're the good guy, and it's like, okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit, where the bad guy doesn't think he's bad, and I can identify with that because I think he is. So it's like, well, wait a minute. If he thinks I'm the bad guy, then you're creating this interesting dynamic, and suddenly the villain becomes a little bit sympathetic, which he should anyway. There should always be a very good reason for what he's doing, and not that it's wrong to have a bad guy who's foaming at the mouth, etc. If it's that kind of book, but if you're going for something with a little bit more depth to it, then it would be nice for the villain to be sympathetic. You're still going to have the hero waste him, but at least readers will understand what he stands for and why he's doing what he does. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I do a mix of both, by the way. Sometimes it's the foamer, and sometimes it's more in depth. Just depends on what kind of book I'm writing.
Yeah, I think the villains with a personality are better than the straight foamer sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because you can
Well,
develop that reader sympathy and you can dig a little bit deeper into the psychology of that person.
right. And since we're getting into the Christmas season, we should talk about Die Hard. The villain in Die Hard was very smooth and sophisticated. He was also very scary. That was a fellow who was there for the money, but if you gave him any complications, he was going to shoot you, and that it is a very formidable villain because of that. And if you compare it with the bad guy in one of the Die Hard ripoffs, it was Passenger 57, Wesley Snipes. I can't remember the bad guy's name, but he was just a foaming at the mouth psychopath, and it didn't have the same kind of impact. And Die Hard, of course, is the better of the two.
Yeah.
And not just because of the villain, but because of a lot of things. But if you compare the villains, it's like, well, yeah, Die Hard is the standout.
And I have to say, it's the best Christmas movie ever.
Yes. And so is Lethal Weapon, by the way. Lethal Weapon doesn't get any love for being a Christmas movie. The first one.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yep. We always leave that out.
Yeah.
But it does happen at Christmas.
That's your Christmas double feature this year.
Better than watching The Grinch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're starting the book, when you sit down to write a new book, and you said you write it on a typewriter because
Yes.
uh,
Oh shoot! I meant to. Well, I've got a couple under the table here. If you want to see one.
you'll have to dig them out.
Yeah. Okay.
So when you sit down to start writing these books, where do you start at? You start at the character problem. You start with the geopolitical spark, action sequence.
Well, I always start with an outline where I plot out everything, and I try to include as much as possible, including research notes and locations, that sort of thing. Where to start a story? That's a good question. I mean, it just depends on whatever hook jumps out at me. If we're starting, or I guess it's like, am I starting with an action scene with a problem in progress, or am I starting with something quieter, a little more intrigue, say a secret meeting? It really kind of depends on the story. I do like to start with action in progress I can't say I do it all the time. One of the Ravens coming out this month. The first one starts out with the secret meeting, and the one after that, Raven 12, starts with an action scene, a rescue. So it always depends, but I do like to have it all planned out before I start typing one word.
Okay. It's a lot of the people I talk to are pantsers. I'm a pantser, and
Yeah, and
there's
I wish. Okay, I wish I could. But and I started out doing that. And authors like Lawrence Block, for example, are terrific pantsers. They also admit to multiple drafts, at least in Block's case,
yeah.
to where you start with the idea, you get your characters in mind, you do the first draft in your head, and off you go. And I tried to write. I did write that way for a good many years, well up into my 20s, and I just found that stories were not coming out, or especially ending, the way I wanted them to. And then I would read Mickey Spillane or Max Allen Collins, and they would always have these good sucker punch endings. And it's like, well, I want endings like that, and just the way I'm writing right now isn't getting me those. And I didn't start outlining until I read about how there's one of the James Bond encyclopedias, big coffee table book. It's huge, where it talks about each movie and the writers discussing things, looking for locations. It's like they would go somewhere and say this would make a great place for an action scene, and then, well, how can we work it into the next movie? It's like, well, it's not the story that came first, it was the action scene that came first. And then it's like, oh, so they're really pre-planning a lot of stuff. So then I started outlining, and then I was able to get the endings I wanted. The books became longer because I had more time to develop the story, and much less rewriting, much less. Sometimes it shows. And anyway, I just found it's a much better process for me. Um, I mean, I have other buddies that say, yeah, we just pants the whole thing, and they turn in 80 to 100,000 words, and it goes to the moon. And it's like, yeah, okay, you know, I wish I could, but
Yeah.
that's it. Just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, we all find the best way to write for ourselves. I mean, that's
Right, which is critical, and it's one thing I always believed growing up was that there was one true way, and I was looking for the one true way, and it turns out there isn't one. And especially now that I'm working regularly, it's like everybody has their different approach. It all ends in a readable product in most cases. I won't name names. Uh, so it's like, okay, there's more than one way to write a book, and there's only a couple of rules you'd really need to follow. And I just like, okay, find your own way. It's like I always thought there would be one way to be successful, and there's not. It just write the book. That's
yeah.
the main thing.
So when you are writing and outlining, are you looking multiple books ahead to create a story arc, or are you just allowing the one story to breathe and then moving to the next one?
Well, that turned out to be a big, there's a little complicated answer, because the short answer is no. The longer answer is I should have, because it came to really bite me in the backside on the Stiletto series. And when I started Raven after that, I just made the vow that these are standalone books in a series. You can pick one in any order and start there. They will all be written as if none of the others exist, because the issues I had with Stiletto, with beginning an arc in one story and then not having any idea where it was going to go, suddenly made complications 3 books later. And the first 8 stilettos, there's only 9, uh, just became very complicated, and I think that's why the series kind of stalled. Certainly wasn't because of sales or feedback. I get more mail on Stiletto than I do anything else, which suggests maybe we did something right, even though I think it's a mess. Um, but yeah, it's like if I ever do that again, I'm going to be thinking not just about the present book. I'm going to be thinking 3 books down the line. Yeah, because at least with Stiletto, that seemed to be where the complications would come in, and I think I handled them okay. I'm not totally happy with the choices I made, but of course, you make all your mistakes with the first baby. So what are you going to do? You got to wait for the second or the third to get it right.
That's right. So you told me how you came up with the Scott Stiletto name. So how did you come up with the other ones? And because this is a fascinating topic to me, is
Mm-hmm.
how authors choose their names for their main characters.
Well, Steve Dane is another interesting story, at least for me, because I was trying to come up with a name and not happy with any of the options. And at the time, I was working the graveyard shift at KCBS in San Francisco, and I came, sat at my desk, and it wasn't our personal desk because there'd been someone else there before me, and they left notes and kind of a mess. And I found one scrap of paper on it, on the desk had two names. One was Steve, and the other looked like Dane. It was actually Dave. It was the names of a couple of anchors that had done a remote report. And from that, it was like, boom, this is the name I want. So from some very sloppy cursive writing is where Steve Dane came from. Sam Raven started out as Jack Raven, and I thought, well, then there's too many Jacks right now, and it's like, what's a good first name that no one has used before, or not before, but doesn't use often? And I came up with Sam, and suddenly I'm seeing a whole lot of Sams in fiction right now. Not that I have any claim on that, but I bet you those other guys were thinking the same thing. What's a name that hasn't been used a lot?
Yeah.
And let's see, Wolf from The Dangerous Mr. Wolf, that set of short stories in one novella. His name started out as Pierce, and I can't remember why I stopped using that one. I know there was a reason for it, and not because it might have been because somebody else had a similar name, or that actually might be what happened. The memory's a little foggy, but I do remember somebody having a Pierce character, different spelling. But then I thought I better change it, and then it became Wolf, and I don't know where Wolf came from. And as far Steve Dane has a girlfriend, Nina Talikova. I specifically set out to make her Russian, and I remember for some reason I liked the name Nina, so that was always there. And then for her last name, Russians have a interesting way of naming themselves, where especially the daughters of a family, they will always add the OVA to their name to signify that they are single women. So Talikova means that she's the daughter of Mr. Talikov, yet she is not married. And when she gets married, she'll, of course, change her name, etc. And then the name Talikov came from a short story I wrote when I was a teenager. That's in a box somewhere, and it just was just bouncing around in there. So I remembered it, and I added the OVA, and there we go. So it's it's like making sausage, but that's how we do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's sometimes when I need a name, and I'll go look at a professional football team and go, okay, I like that name and I like that name, and I'll put them together.
Mm-hmm.
And or I'll look and go, okay, I because I have a spreadsheet all my character names I've used in the book, and I'll say, what letter of the alphabet haven't I started a name with?
Oh,
And because you don't want to, want my main character's name is Ryan. You don't want a Ryan and a Rick and a Rob and a
right.
because people get confused, and so I'll go out and find a name that that a letter that I haven't used before, and
Mm-hmm.
try and find
Well,
something new.
if you look at my list, I have a Scott, a Steve, and a Sam. So
I, and that's why I asked earlier. How do you get confused? Or
it was a
get
complete.
confused?
It was a total accident, and I didn't realize it until one day where I put uh, some folders together on the computer, and suddenly I'm looking, Scott, Steve, and Sam. What am I doing with S's here? So the next character well, has an S to begin his last name, but a J to begin his first, and that series is coming out. It's 3 books. It'll be out next year. But I had to make something, had to do it differently at that
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. So let's roll into the publishing aspect of it. You said you started out as a self-published author, and then got picked up in a publishing deal. Um, where are you at now? Are you looking to go back to self-published, or
No, I have one more book due on the current contract, and then we'll have a discussion as to what comes next, and go from there. Um, the way I look at it, I mean, the publisher takes a cut, of course, and the way I look at it is their cut would be what I would spend on my own marketing anyway. So
yeah,
one way or another, that money's going somewhere,
yeah,
and it might as well go to somebody who's providing a good cover, good editing, and spends money on some ads, and because that's what I'd be doing with it. So I'm perfectly happy to stay with the arrangement we have, and um, the
I
only
mean, it
question
seems.
is, sorry.
I was going to say it seems like you have a good arrangement. You got
It,
a lot of reviews. You've got good ratings. So
yeah, we get along, so it's not too bad. I guess the only question is, after 12 books, has Raven run out of steam? Do we need to change gears or stay the course? So, I mean, that's what we'll be talking about.
I mean, there's Travis McGee's got what 22 books. I know authors that have got 30 books in a series. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you probably have room to run.
Probably.
So
Yeah, we'll see.
yeah,
Maybe I can talk him into a new Scott Stiletto. We'll get her up to 10 books.
yeah. That's, and I found it. I had a series where I had the overarching bad guy carried through 5 books. And once I finished that up, I could reinvent the character a little bit in book 6 to
Mm-hmm.
carry him into new missions and new
Right,
projects. So that's always an easy way to do it.
right. That keeps things fresh,
So
too.
yep, yeah. So are you're primarily on Amazon Kindle Unlimited. So did as your publisher talk to you about going wide, or are you interested in doing that?
No, I don't think it's ever come up, actually. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the Kindle store is the second biggest bookstore in the world.
Yeah,
Amazon's the first. So there's a lot of readers there. Uh, the way the payout goes, it's like you can only get so many subscribers, and then when you get this many subscribers and that many authors, then we're going to have a problem. But so far, they seem to make it work,
yeah,
and I wish I sold more paperbacks because it's like 80-90% of all the sales are ebooks and rentals, the KU rentals at that. But readers keep coming back. It seems to do okay, and I guess if I'm writing glorified magazine pieces, then what the hell? I mean, it worked for
yeah.
Walter
I mean,
Gibson, so
yeah. And we're I think each book has a specific formula, but we're all following the same exact 7 or 8 general
yeah. I
outlines.
mean, yeah, I know, and then I thought it was funny. The fourth Sam Raven dealt with the Ukraine situation. At the same time, Brad Thor came out with a book dealing with the Ukraine situation. We both had completely different takes, but similar ideas in that we wanted to go to that part of the world and deal with that conflict. Um, there's another author, J.T. Patton. I haven't heard much from him lately, but a couple of years ago, I came up with this story idea. It was an opening scene, a teenage boy, 16, escaping from a burning house. Right, very exciting.
Yeah,
He's very upset that his family is still in there and hasn't gotten out. He doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, this man in black with a pistol comes out of the. It's in the cabin in the forest. Man in black comes out of the trees, goes to the boy, says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't get here in time." I'm like, "Wow, what is this? Where is this going?" Uh, so then I started making some notes, and it's like, okay, well, the father of the teenager was involved in some sort of special op. The guy in black was his partner, trying to get them out of the house before the bomb went off, and the teenager grows up to take his father's place, et cetera, et cetera. I thought this is a great idea. I'm busy with Scott Stiletto, so I'm going to set this aside for a while. And I just put it in the drawer. Mr. Patton comes out with a book within a couple of months with the same concept. Now, he and I have never met. We've never spoken. I think we may have shared an exchange on Facebook once. That's how I know of him. But there we were in that parallel thinking. And I suppose it's just the risks of the game. It's like we're all writing about the same stuff. We're selling to the same readers, doing the same research, talking to the same sources. We're going to repeat each other, and sometimes by accident. And I don't read the other stuff because I don't want to do it on purpose. And it's like if it's an accident, you can talk your way out of it,
Yeah.
But it's very amusing though when those things happen, and I had a good laugh. Now in another 10 years after JT has done his series, maybe I'll bring mine out, but it's going to sit for a while.
Yeah. You don't want to seem like a ripoff, and that's
No, exactly.
yeah. But I think Mark Greeny did a book about Ukraine too,
Oh, he did.
and
Wouldn't surprise me.
so the hot take was always that Ukraine was just could do no wrong in these books, and I think Brad Thor did the same thing. Like Russia's completely the bad guy, and Ukraine is always the good guy, and
It's a little more complicated than that.
I think so, and it's I don't want to write about that part of the world because I don't have really a whole lot of interest in that part of the world, but I my take on it probably isn't what everybody else's take would be, and that my book probably wouldn't sell very well.
Well, it would be worth doing just because of that. I mean, even mine had to do with the simmering conflict and then a false flag to spark the conflict. So even I had a different take than average. I mean, it certainly wasn't Russia bad, Ukraine good. It was just like there's someone behind the scenes manipulating both sides.
Yeah, and that's I tend to write a lot about South America because and Central America because it to me it's interesting. The CIA has done a lot of spooky stuff down there, and we're involved in a massive military buildup in there right now. So
We've been involved in Central America for decades,
yeah,
and for some cases debatable reasons. But I mean, but yeah, but for in terms of an espionage and action story, it is very fertile ground. And yeah, I mean, focusing on one area is not a bad idea at all.
yeah. I just most of my books are set other than the Stuntman series, which is in L.A. Everything is pretty much set in that Caribbean area. There's a lot of crime, a lot of stuff that happens in that region. And one of the things I have a problem with is sometimes you get this storyline in your head, and it has this like global overreach, and it's like how do I draw this down so it's a local like my character specifically on a bad guy? Is that something that you have a problem with too?
Not that I can recall. Um, I mean, you always go through the different scenarios to get the two together for the climax, or maybe they meet in the middle of the book or whatever. I always liked in James Bond how he kind of needles the bad guy a little bit throughout, and then they have their big confrontation.
Yeah,
No, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to answer because I mean, so much of it is I don't want to say automatic, but it's like I just end up going through this thought process and this brainstorming period, and it's like, well, we can do this, we can try that, maybe this will work, and you just really kind of just shake it all together and see what sticks.
yeah, yeah. It's a well, I guess it's like with your false flag operation. That's a pretty broad storyline. You got a lot of characters operating. You got, you know, I'm just going to throw this out because I really don't know what your storyline is, but you probably got Washington involved, you got Russia involved, you got Ukraine, you got all these characters, and it's like, how do you simmer that down to just focus on one character?
Well, in that case, I'm glad you mentioned that specifically because I actually left out the Russians in Washington, and it was an arms dealer and his kid who was a little greedy, and some mercenaries that the kid knew, and yeah, so I did kind of keep it narrowed down, and it was yeah, not as big as you might think. It yeah, I've only got 60,000 words to play with.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
my the length of that's the length that the publisher wants, and I like to write to that. They want more, and it's like okay. I mean, when Mark Rainey writes a book, he turns in 200,000. I mean, the guy's a monster. He
Yeah.
just vomits all over each page, and so he's got a lot of room for all the political intrigue and having the Russians in it and Washington and yada yada yada. Well, I don't have that room. I could make it. I just didn't. I don't want to. I don't like it. I don't want to. So to keep it manageable, yeah, I just kept it with a short cast. No governments involved. It was all people in the shadows, and their goal was to blow up the Crimea Bridge. By the way, to get the Russians mad enough to invade. And lo and behold, a few months into the war, someone blew up the Crimean Bridge. So were they reading my book, or was I just that good? At
I,
predicting what was going to happen.
I always think that authors as a whole, when we go out and look at a global conflict, and starting to narrow it down into these plots, there's only so much stuff that can actually happen, and we might be kind of predicting the future on like blowing up the bridge. If you look at what the infrastructure is, or what the plot can be, you invariably end up predicting the future because somebody else is going to up with that idea.
Yeah, well, it's happened. Mike Newton wrote a book, um, Death Cruise, I think it was. Anyway, it was a book in the '80s where he predicted the P. Well, no, he didn't predict anything. The book was about the PLO hijacking a cruise ship. Later on, the PLO actually hijacked a cruise ship, the Achille Laurel,
Yeah.
and his comment was that when you know what your bad guys do in real life, it is very easy to imagine what they might do in fiction. And if you write from a realistic perspective, you might get pretty close. I have a friend who used to work at CIA, and I sometimes I bounce ideas off of her. If I'm reading something, it's like, hey, I've noticed a connection or something between these news stories that might make a connection. Do you think this would be a good story, etc. And if she doesn't laugh too hard, or if she does laugh hard, then I think I might be either onto something or not. Um, because it becomes easy, or not easy, but you become accustomed to thinking like a bad guy, and there are times where it's like, well, gee, it's a good thing I'm not, because you learn about security systems. For example, I can walk into a building, look for the cameras, and it's like, oh, that's that kind of type. I can defeat it with such and such, and just from what you
Yep.
read, because it's available information. They're not hiding it,
Yep.
and you learn enough. You can think like them and plot like them, and then suddenly in real life they do something that is like, ooh, okay, I kind of wrote about that. Sometimes our own government might be doing things that I jumped the gun on. The fourth, was it the fourth stiletto? No, it was the fifth. The Menace Deception, Stiletto 5, dealt with a coup in Venezuela. At the time, there were rumors that such a thing might be taking place any minute, and I thought, well, this is great. I'll have the book done. The coup will happen. Everybody will think I have inside connections or I'm brilliant. That coup was quickly betrayed and put down, and didn't happen. Of course, now we might do something there again. So it's
Yeah.
like, things just don't happen out of the blue like that. That was a project that had been planned earlier, failed, and now we might be trying it again, probably.
Yeah.
So you learn enough about both sides, and you can kind of come up with a realistic scenario, and sometimes you see it play out in real life.
Yeah. I had a situation like that where my character ended up in Venezuela, and they were interrogating him, thinking he was a U.S. spy. They're trying to, mark a map for an invasion. And I had a reader send me a note that says this isn't realistic. And like 2 weeks later, they arrested all these guys from Silvercorp for trying to do just that.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I know.
so it's Venezuela to me is just fascinating because of all the drama around it. And there's a lot of stuff that a lot of geopolitical stuff that we don't actually see or nobody actually talks about that is happening there. But
Well, they have oil, they have gold, they have resources, and the Russians and Chinese want it,
yep,
and we don't want them to have it. So there you go.
you nailed it. So
Yes.
yeah, that is the Don Rowe doctrine right there on the in a
Yeah, and
nutshell.
all this talk about, well, they're narco terrorists. It's like, okay, when was the last time Venezuela came up as far as a nation involved with drug dealing? It's Colombia and Mexico. Um,
Yeah.
it's like, no, Venezuela has other things that we are interested in, and maybe they're into drugs. It's never really come up before, so
No,
just because it hasn't doesn't mean it's not true. But the overarching reason for us going in there is to keep the Russians and the Chinese out of there.
yeah, and they are heavily invested in that area. There is Iran is heavily invested there.
Yes.
Um, the drug trafficking, they're not doing drug production. They just traffic through the country because it is a core pipeline to get move the drugs out.
Ah.
But so they move drugs through the country via actually the Venezuelan military helps facilitate it. So they move it to the Gulf of Paria and over into Trinidad and then on up the coast. But
Okay. I didn't know that.
yeah, so that a lot of the kinetic strikes you're seeing on these drug boats are happening in that Gulf between Trinidad and Venezuela.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll have to read up some more on that. I have to admit I have not
yeah.
because I've been busy with the other stuff, but you have me intrigued now.
That's so that's my bread and butter. I write a lot about Venezuela and the stuff going on and happening there. So that's
Mm.
I spend a lot of time researching it.
Oh,
So
very good.
yeah. So as you're going through this process of writing these great books, my last question for an author is, what do you want readers to take away from them?
Well, I hope they enjoy it for what it is, which is just a roller coaster ride. Um, I try to put deeper themes and meanings, etc., morals, if you will, in each book. I don't hit anybody over the head with them because I look at it as just the spine of the story. It has to mean something more than just car chases and gunfights for me to be interested. So I will put that stuff underneath. And if the reader figures it out or gets it, that's great. If not, I really don't care. It's for me. Um, so to that end, that yeah, sometimes they will be a little bit more in depth than other action novels, but at the end of the day, just have a good time. And if it's the gunfights and car chases that delight you, then I'll serve up some of that some more. And if it's the other stuff, well, then you'll get that too. So we just I'm writing the books I enjoyed when I was young that took me to other places, and I'm really just doing that for other readers too.
Yeah, that's the whole key to this whole thing, and that's the reason we write. So
Yeah.
that is a wrap on this episode of Plot Recon, where thrillers get tactical. Thank you to Brian Drake for pulling back the curtain on his action-packed universe, from Scott Stiletto to Sam Raven to Wolf and beyond, and for breaking down what it takes to thrive inside the Kindle Unlimited arena. His consistency, craft, and long game approach to a series building are a blueprint for any author looking to stay sharp and stay prolific. If you haven't read Brian's work yet, start with Scott Stiletto and move on from there. So read every book he's got, because that
Well,
helps
there's
every author make money and pay the bill.
well, we're on book 35 now, so if you start with
Well,
Stiletto, it's going to be a while. I tell people to start with Sam Raven. That's my favorite.
start with Sam Raven. All right, perfect. And if you want to start on his books, you can either check him out on Kindle Unlimited or go to his website, briandrakebooks.com. And as always, if this episode has hit the mark, share it, leave a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And check out the merch section at evangraver.com. Grab a book, a t-shirt, a mug, or a sticker, and help me keep Plot Recon flowing. I'm Evan Graver. Thanks for listening. Stay sharp, write hard, and keep your fiction tactical.